Hello everyone, my name is Lauren Sergi and this is Talk Shop, the place where you can learn from industry experts how to become a more powerful communicator in work and in life. We are halfway through 2018 and this year has been marked by people across all socioeconomic backgrounds raising their voices against injustices in our culture and in our society. As inspiring as this is to see, many of us are still afraid to take on that act ourselves, to own the power of our voice and to lift it up against injustices that we see happening in our own backyard or in our own countries. Here to help us learn how to own the power of our voice, how to lift it up and end the silence is true Canadian treasure, Andrea Menard. Andrea Menard is an accomplished Métis singer, actress, and speaker who crosses cultural and language boundaries by speaking from her heart. Whether speaking to a high-security room of NATO officers, a stadium of Indigenous youth, or a hall of business professionals, Andrea inspires with her message about reconciliation and the empowerment of both Indigenous and feminine voices. She is one of the stars of the Netflix series Blackstone, has released 4 award-winning CDs, written and starred in 2 television programs, and has spoken all over the world. Her 2018 talk at the prestigious TEDx Stanley Park is titled Silent No More and encourages others to end the silence around violence against women. Andrea, welcome to Talk Shop. Thank you so much for being here and being part of this project. Your TED Talk has been getting a lot of views and a lot of receptions. That was a powerful piece of art that you created there.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for asking me to join your show.
You are ever so welcome. Like I said, I'm delighted to have you on here. And that, like I said, that TED Talk, that was outstanding. The title was Silent No More. And you also released a companion song with the same title. And during this talk and in this song, you speak about violence against women and your own experience of voicelessness after being violently attacked. That's a concept that I'd like to dig into a little bit in terms of this idea of having a voice, because letting your voice be heard, it goes way beyond the mere act of speaking. So in your view, what does it mean to actually have a voice?
Voice can be a metaphor for so many things. So you're right to say, yeah, it's beyond just being able to speak or just speaking or singing, right? As a singer. The voice to me is our right to speak, our claim of space, our beingness, our individual way of looking at the world, of approaching the world, of interacting with the world. So it's like your center of gravity being seen, taking that center of gravity, that way of looking at the world, that way of being in the world, culturally, gender, whatever, just that center of gravity, and having the right to feeling like you have the right to take up space with that view.
Right. And that's, I love that definition. It really speaks very much to the speaker side of me. Of course, you and I are both speakers. That's how we met. And we've seen people who can stand there and be utterly silent, and simply by their dint of occupying, like you said, occupying that space and holding that space and the silence as well, they are saying something in that moment. They're letting us see them. They're being there, and they're claiming that voice and that right to be seen, not just to be heard, but saying, look at me. That in and of itself is an act of speaking out.
Totally. And you'll see on the opposite side, you'll see the ones that are invisible, that try and take up as little space as possible. And, that happens with, the training in our society, whether it's gender or culturally, there's an acceptable space taking, and then there's a shrinking away from the norms. So I, of course, I care deeply about helping those who shrink back, who don't seem to have a voice in society, to take up space and to take their space in the circle.
And that's something that our society has been battling with, and I'm sure we'll continue to battle with, because of course the people that we silence, it shifts.
Yeah.
It's one of those dark sides of
Absolutely.
human nature that we do, depending on our own position, might seek to silence others, and that does shift around. But I think it's this notion, not that we will all be able to be heard at all points in time, but that we constantly strive for that.
Exactly.
That we constantly, relentlessly strive for people to have a voice. And when we realize that someone else, that it's now been taken away, that we then say, okay, good, it's your turn now. Let's make sure that you have it. It's always looking to empower people in that way.
Absolutely.
Now, in your talk, there was this great bit where you spoke about making noise and having permission to make noise. So that's something else I'd like to unpack a bit. What shape does noise take?
Well, I think there's two ways to look at noise. I think there's the noise of society's standards. So there's noise of distraction. There's noise of TVs and cell phones and radios and everything just distracting you. So it's like being heard above the noise is one thing, but then there's permission to actually make noise. And that is when you are blocked in your throat and in your heart and in your courage, when you're blocked to be able to speak your truth. And so sometimes when that blockage is happening in your throat or in your body of some sort, if that blockage is there, the hardest thing and the most important thing to do is just to give permission to make noise, to go past that, that blockage. And sometimes, like many of us have been there, of just a simple no when you mean no, or a simple yes when you mean yes. Those are permission to make noise. It's moving past your blockage. Does that make sense?
It does make a lot of sense, actually. And it's funny because even people who we might see as being powerful can feel blocked in different ways. Oddly enough, and I am in no way making contrasts in terms of the degree of silencing, but sometimes, oddly enough, I deal with executives who say, I'm fine in front of this group of people, but you move me to a different group and it's like I can't talk in front of them. And I find that what it is that they haven't mentally figured out where they are in that space and what they're supposed to be doing. So in a way, they've taken away their own voice because they just say, I don't know what I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And it really can take someone who's completely capable, who might speak incredibly well in one arena, and you put them into a different arena and they go,
absolutely.
Vanishes.
And that's all walks of life. So there's the professionals. I mean, I'm a singer and an actor and a speaker. I should be able to use my voice, but I went through major periods of blockage. So it's about, owning your, overcoming that particular space, overcoming the fear of that, taking it up in that particular space. Like you say, the executive is in one room and then go to the, it's like they have to engage their courage and their permission to make noise in that particular space. So it absolutely is. It can be how you approach life generally, or it can be when you move outside your comfort zone.
And of course, there's definite, indisputable, disproportionate silencing of certain groups of people, definitely of our Indigenous peoples in Canada, definitely of women across many cultures. How do others take away this permission to make noise? Because I think that sometimes when we do it, it's unconscious. Other times it's definitely intentional. But what are these things that we need to watch out for to make sure that we don't take away other people's permission?
Well, in the Western society, and I will say the non-Indigenous, so in Western society, in most English-speaking or other, Eurocentric views, all the systems in the Western world are Eurocentric and male-centric, and all the systems of government, policy, political, health, education, military, all of them have been set up and created for a specific group. Right. And that is the Euro, maybe no, I guess the white male,
white male.
And that's, it just is what it is. There's no judgment around that. It's just that's what the systems were created for. And so every other aspect of society, we've all had to fight to get into that system. Women couldn't get the vote, and, Indigenous people didn't get the vote till the 60s, and, just on and on and on and on. So The systems are set up for one voice to matter. And that's the one at the top, because they're all hierarchical. And in Indigenous communities, it's a circle. So you look at me trying to put it in the video. So it's a hierarchy or a circle.
Yeah.
And I think like the hierarchical systems are not, they're not valuable anymore. They have their value, but I think that they're starting to crumble because a lot of human beings on this planet are waking up to the idea of equality and caring for our fellow humans. But when one person at the top, that means that one person is on top and everyone else is less than. And that's not a holistic way of looking at the world.
Yeah.
So when we say who gets silenced, everyone below the top gets silenced. That's just the nature of the systems in place. And all the systems, education, caters to the ones at the top. And, if you fall through the cracks, well, you're just this echelon of society is now just, everywhere you go, you're going to be in that echelon of society.
Yeah.
And, people, of course, fight and to get in and reach the top, because that's been what the goal is in these societies of these hierarchical systems. But there's an awakening happening, in my teachings, as I say in my TED Talk, that my elders are saying, and all elders, I think in all Indigenous communities all over the globe are saying it's the time of the sacred feminine. We're moving away from those masculine ways of being. And there's, again, no judgment. It's just that's where we were.
It's not a judgment issue at all. It's just, this is what it is at this point.
And it's falling away to make room for the other. And for masculine ways are to expand, to conquer, to act, to, absorb. Whereas, maybe not absorb, but wrong word. But the feminine is more inclusion, caring, nurturing. So all of those things that have left people in the cold are now going to be included into the circle. So let's just say that we're in the heart of it. We are in the beginning stages of it. So we're seeing things crumble before our very eyes. And that's why my talk and things like that about empowering voices that haven't been heard will reach the heart of people, because it's
and it's I love that you recognize that it's not a judgment thing when we say that there are people who are at the top and they have been given a more greater voice. It's systematic, right? It affects people wherever they're at. It doesn't mean that the people who have experienced the privilege are bad. It just means that they've been operating within a different system, and it's important to recognize that and then say, okay, well, how can we balance things out? So there's another side to silencing, and it's when we silence ourselves. And that tends to be the side that I more see, simply because of the way that my own business operates. That is usually what I see a little bit more. But certainly when people experience a lot of external silencing, it becomes internal as well. So in what way do we deny ourselves the permission to speak? Like, what's going on in our heads when we take away our own voices?
Well, I would say that, when we have systemic silencing, that's one thing. But if you've swallowed it, we have all swallowed the systems, hook, line, and sinker in many ways. It's like we grew up with them when we're sort of programmed in everything around us to continue it. It's like it wants to be self-perpetuated. So in many ways, the system's done its work. Like we just swallow it whole and go, I'm not allowed to speak here. Like I am not allowed. Not you're not allowed, I'm not allowed. And so it's both. So once we've internalized this silencing or this behaving in a certain way, then we have to overcome ourselves. Then we become the one we need to overcome. And that's the greatest challenge. It's the biggest obstacle, but it's the one that we can do. And we silence ourselves in every way. We want to fit in when we want to fit in.
Yep.
When we want just people to like us. If I say this, I'll be liked, or if I don't say this, I will be liked.
If I say this, I'm going to be booted out. No.
Exactly. Yeah. So we do it for belonging and to fit in. And that's a huge part of who we are as human beings. We want so much to belong. And, instead of us feeling like we're part of this circle, we know, we've been trained that there's one at the top, and if we're at the bottom, it doesn't feel as good as being at the top.
Yeah.
So,
heavens knows that's true.
Right?
Yeah.
Someday we're going to recognize this circle is really great.
It's really great.
It feels so good.
Now, the silencing in your talk, you speak about the very, very big silencing that happens surrounding violence against women. Now, how does the big silencing, not just the big silencing, but there's the little silencing as well, how does this creep in to everyday life? Where do we see it being imposed in everyday life? Like in your experience as well, our experiences are going to be quite different, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, there is, when violence against women has been normalized in our world, right? In many ways, it's been normalized because 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. That's my first line, almost in the talk.
It's a staggering statistic.
Women, and it's higher in in women of color and Indigenous. Yeah. It's higher, so almost 1 in 2. And that's half the women in the world. So you go, that's a lot of women. So why then would only a small portion of it be reported, like a tiny portion of it be reported? And so that means somewhere it's been normalized. Somewhere women have, felt that we have to behave in a certain way. So there's the big silencing of that's a lot of programming for that many people to be silent and that many men or the abusers to think that's normal or get away with it, so that's a big societal problem of silencing. But in the little silencing that you asked about, again, that comes down to overcoming our own programming for it. Because how many people recognize the idea of, I said yes when I wanted to say no.
Yeah.
That in itself, that is a huge way of silencing self. Because the little voice inside your heart, that really, if we were to put this into a really easy way to look at it, is that we have our heart voice, our intuitive voice, the one that knows us and is the best for us. And that's the one, because it's quiet, it's the one that gets bulldozed into, well, I should say this because it's the right thing to do, and then everyone will like me if I say it,
Yeah.
Instead of that heart voice says, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. Yes, I will. Oh, that's silencing of self. And that happens all the time in our lives. People do it all the time in work, in friendships, in families, and then the guilt and all that other stuff. So that's a big silencing aspect. So just being able to hear your inner voice, your heart voice, your inner voice, whatever you want to call it, it knows what's best for you in that moment. And so listening to that is huge.
That is huge. And our brain likes to override a lot of the heart.
Yeah. The noise of the world. We're like, I can't hear it. It's too busy. It's too noisy.
So for people who are feeling silenced around these really big, difficult topics, what do you want them to know? Like, what do you want their brain to know so that it can let the heart voice come out?
That, this is your true wisdom. The heart is your true wisdom. There's the wisdom of the program, of the systems, which can be wisdom in and of itself, but it may not be wisdom for your own life. It may not be it for one, like you might be coming to a period of life where your whole truth says, I need to go against this system. This system is wrong for my people. It's wrong for my gender. It's wrong for, my sliding gender, it depends, right? We are a changing people, and the system is not working for that truth anymore necessarily. So was your question, what can people do about it?
Yeah. Well, first up, what do you want them to know? Like what should they be saying? Okay, this is something I know. Someone told me this and I can swallow it. I can swallow this, so this might help me raise up the voice.
Okay. So I would say a little bit of nugget of wisdom is that your voice is your truth. If you use your voice in that metaphorical way of owning your space, that's your truth. And that is the most valuable thing you have. And I'm not saying the truth. I'm saying your truth. Yeah. Your truth is valuable for the world. I mean, we're all here in this changing time. And everyone's individual truth coming from their deep inner knowing is part of the change. So if one person's silence, if more and more people are breaking out of that silence of just being good and a good girl or a good boy in the system, and they're starting to speak their truth of saying, this is wrong, or this isn't right for me, this, I don't agree with this anymore. Those kind of things are the change. They are the change we're going through on this planet. And they are absolutely important to listen to. It may not be that you have the ability to listen to it yet. You may not be great at listening to it yet, but it's there. Every single person has a truth and has an inner knowing. And you may be familiar with it, you may not be. But maybe the invitation then is that for you to be the best voice or the best speaker or whatever, whoever's listening, the best person with a strong center of gravity as you can be on this planet, is to know that you have one. You have a right to speak. You have a right to your truth, and that the world needs it. And that the more you listen and the more you get to know it, the more you will be bringing about a better change in the world, because your inner knowing is part of the change and part of changing this beautiful world.
See, this is why people have you talk to large groups of people about this. This is why. Now, you open up the door to let us get a little practical. I love getting practical with this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So what are some, especially for people who are afraid to speak up in a big way, what are some small steps that we can take? Like little everyday things that we can practice to exercise that voice?
Well, one of the things that I don't really get into as a part of my training, but our emotions are our barometer of our truth. They actually is the way to develop knowing how to listen to it. Oh, that felt wrong. Ooh, this feels bad. I feel bad, right? So first of all, letting your feelings not be an enemy. Let them be your friend. They are your friend. So when you feel bad, it's because, oh, what's happening? Is there some truth what's going on? It's like they are a barometer of what's going on with you in the present moment. And I don't know if anyone's heard that before, but your emotions are your friend and they are your teachers from the moment, not yesterday, not tomorrow, today in the moment. What's happening right now? Did I say something did I say yes when I should have said no? Oh, that's why I feel bad. That's getting to know yourself. So first of all, listening to your feelings, getting to know them, because that is the way inward. It's an inner voice. So it's not outward. Your inner truth is not out there. It's inside, which means you sort of have to get to know the little ways that the inner world speaks to you. And feelings is a big one. So there's getting to know your feelings, and then there's letting your feelings be expressed. It's the little practices. So getting to know your feelings, maybe express your feelings. And then the next one would be practice saying your truth to someone in a letter, or maybe in a letter that no one writes or no one reads, but to practice actually expressing it somehow. Because your voice can be through writing too. It doesn't necessarily have to be speaking. But it can be, again, your center of gravity is you expressing your truth. So writing your truth, or practicing what it feels like to write it out or say it to someone, that's a big deal. Because if you've never said it to anyone, the first time you say it is like, so practice saying your truth. And they can be, like you say, saying yes when you mean yes, and say no when you say no. When you mean, and really mean it. Really mean it as well. No hesitation. Yeah. Or at least don't give the impression that you're having that internal struggle. Just well, but you know what? If you're in the beginning stages of saying your truth, it's okay if you flounder a little.
Yeah,
it's okay if you go. Yes.
And actually, that's something that I'd love to hit on too, because there was this amazing moment in your talk when you described a moment of noise catharsis. It was catharsis through noise. On the riverbank, you're howling out the grief and the fear and the shame that was keeping you silent for so long. And forgive me, it's not an elegant thing. But it's
messy.
Necessary. And I think that sometimes people think that if they are going to speak out, it needs to be well spoken and elegant, and the T's crossed and the I's dotted, and it needs to make sense and be perfect. And that idea just kills our voices even more. Like your riverbank moment, that is sheer inelegance, but it's the rawness and it's the honesty behind it that matters.
It's messy. The inner world is messy, which is why, again, this little hierarchy of everything in the circle, everything's loud. Okay.
Yeah.
This is loud in the circle. And the truth is that I wanted to be a good girl too. I wanted to be a good girl and just be okay and contain everything. And I just couldn't, because my gift to the world is about learning how to feel and learning how to express. So me out on the riverbank, I needed to express in the ugliest, snottiest way possible. And I still do.
Yes.
So it's always messy, but it is the cleansing process. Yeah. It's a cleansing process. And by again, I got my voice back by cleansing my emotions. The emotions were stuck in my throat and in my heart and in my body. And I think that's what happens with most people, is that a lot of our stuff is stuck in our bodies. So for me, emotional release is a big, big part of the solution. Yeah. In a safe way. And of course, that's the rise of the feminine. You know, the feminine is associated with emotion. So of course, it wasn't really looked at as something valuable, because it's like messy and ooh. Yeah.
Let's not go there.
Yeah. Well, we are moving into a world where we're going to honor our emotions more, and they probably won't lead our life. Like they won't run our lives so much. Yeah. Because they're not suppressed. So that's where we're moving.
Right. And that's a good place to move.
And so that means there's going to be a lot of riverbank moments for people in the transition.
Well, and the mess is important, because the mess is, regardless of whether it's a big silence that you're overcoming or a little silence that you're overcoming, or you're just even trying to figure out what your voice sounds like, you figure that out by making the mess. And I mean, I love to tell people, especially when they say, well, I can't speak out because I don't speak so well. I can't express things as nicely as, this person does, or that person does, or as you do. Like, Andrea, you said it so beautifully, but that's because you said it. That's because we say these things in ugly ways a lot in the background, and we wrestle with them there. Yeah. Like, you gotta make the mess in order for the eloquence to come out.
Absolutely. And here I am in my life. You should have seen the mess created just getting my TED Talk, just having the courage once again, all over again, to say it. Yeah. So again, that was a mess. You should have seen the snotty Kleenexes that have come, that I, once again, had to recall and remember what that inner truth was. It was a big journey. Yeah. So I have surrendered to the fact that if I'm going to be public, and even if I wasn't, if I'm just going to keep constantly tuning into my inner truth and to learn what my voice is here to add to the community, to the circle, then I'm going to just keep saying yes to the next release, because this world is not easy. The world is rather difficult. We come up with obstacles all the time. And if that's the case, then that means our inner truth is going to change from each shift and each transition we go through. So what used to be a resounding yes might be a resounding no now. Well, when did that happen? And all of a sudden you have to have the courage to now change your mind. Mm-hmm. So if we commit to saying, I'm going to honor my voice and I'm going to honor my inner truth, then that means that it might be messy for your whole life. Yeah. Because you're listening and you're listening well. And again, if we're in a time of big change, then who says it's going to be static? Who said our life is going to be static?
That'd be boring.
Right?
Let's not go there.
Right.
Let's not let it be that. And it's funny too, because I speak on things like rhetoric, right? My scale of trauma in my talks is non-existent, more or less. I want to be very aware of this. And hell, when I'm putting these things together, when I'm putting these talks together, I'm pitching fits and tantrums in my office because even just wrestling with the ideas is hard. So I can barely imagine the mess with these really, really big, heavy, life-altering societal issues that you and that people like you are taking on. So I mean, for people out there watching this who say, I'm afraid of the mess, God, don't be. Don't be. It's part of it. And anytime you look to lift your voice and raise your voice and put it out there, there will be those moments of doubt and messiness. Get it out. Wrestle with them. Embrace that part too. Because when the mess comes out, that's where the real golden ideas form too. That's where you can start to change things.
Totally. That is the truth. And the mess, if you were to change your thinking that the mess is sacred, whoa, total change. Is that the mess is actually the sacred journey. Yeah. Whoa, big difference. Then
thank you for that.
The clean little finished product, again, that's the sweat and tears that did it. But
I'm going to be putting that out as a tweetable, and I will credit you, Andrea, every time I say this. But I think that might be a line that I need to borrow from you on stage, is that the mess is sacred. Because that's such a big part of it. Now, just as we wrap up here, I want to throw back a little bit to the time that I met you. You were giving a talk about dialogue between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples, how we can get through the awkwardness and the defenses and just talk to each other. And the issue surrounding violence against women is a big thing that we need to talk about, because there is the disproportionate silencing of Indigenous women in Canada. This is beyond doubt. So how can someone like me, and I am well aware that I'm privileged, I use this half joke that I'm basically a suburban princess. How can people like myself who are coming at this from an angle of privilege help to stop the silencing without being patronizing, without being presumptuous, without, oh God forbid, appropriating someone else's reality? Because that's a genuine fear that can hold us back when we want to help.
Yeah.
Like, we want to help, but we know that you're strong as well. So how do we do this dance?
Well, thank you for that question, because, just the very fact that you're asking the question is a big deal, Lauren. That's a big deal, because those are the questions we need to be asking.
Yeah.
I guess some of the things that I've recognizing in the dialogue between, Indigenous Canadians and non-Indigenous Canadians is, is that so many people want to now suddenly be experts of Indigenous. I have to know things about Indigenous culture. I have to be an expert. Well, here's where you can relax, is that Indigenous people are the experts of Indigenous culture and Indigenous world, right? Yep. So maybe the invitation now is you and the fellow Canadians, non-Indigenous Canadians, need to educate yourself about the real history. That's a big deal, because most people still don't know the history of Canada, of what happened in the residential schools and the 60s scoop, but that information is now being recorded, and people can find it online and they can educate themselves. So that's where Western mind can be an expert.
Yeah. And it's a scary thing to confront too, because absolutely. It makes you,
and it's going to
thinking about who you are, who we are,
yeah. And it has to happen.
It has to happen.
That awakening and that facing of the shame and guilt and all of that is your job. Mm-hmm. That's your turn and your job to do that, to move through that stuff. And it's awful. And you're going to go, well, I didn't do anything. It wasn't my culture. It wasn't my family. But the fact is that it's part of a lineage, and it's we today that need to do that work. So if everything's accepted in the circle, that shame and that guilt and that uncomfortable and projection and avoiding, that all has to be faced and accepted. So that's your part, I'll say you as everyone.
Yeah.
If you really want to know.
The royal you.
Yeah, the royal you. And so that is the messy part. That's the part that is going that most Canadians are going to have to face. And when they are confronted with the real history, it's traumatizing. It's because your government let you down, your media let you down, and your education system let you down about what really goes on here. So that's important that you figure that out. That's where your expertise of education and research and being able to track things down, we are the systems have made us good researchers, right? So that's the most Canadians' job now. You have to do that work. Now, what's the invitation then for you is that you don't have to be an expert in our culture. You don't have to be an expert in knowing what we know. But maybe the gift is to ask the questions and let us be the experts. We're not the victims. I mean, we don't want to be seen. We're not victims. We are so resilient. The magic and the miracles happening behind the scenes that you don't know about is just waiting for someone to open the door and peek in and go, hi, would you come and tell us about your expertise and your wisdom and your culture, you know? So it's like, think of it as two expert communities, and one is different. One is very different because it's culturally based. I mean, we like Indigenous people see the world in a circular way, in that feminine way. So you can't separate spirituality from Indigenous culture. And that's a challenge for many people who've raised in the Euro-Christian way.
Yeah.
But that's the real work. So just the fact that you've given me the floor to speak and ask the questions in what you can do is a big part of it. That's part of true reconciliation, you wanting to know. And you have faced that, discomfort and, oh God, this is a terrible history. I mean, it has to be faced.
Yeah. And it is terrible. It's
terrible. Yeah.
So it's
things like,
sorry, go ahead, Andrea.
Just like one, I didn't say it, but one thing you can research are the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's report with 94 calls to action. There's 94 calls to action that Canadians can actually go and research and go, oh, well, that's my field. I'm in health. What can I do? Oh, I'm in education. What can I do? Oh, I'm in the religious sector. What can I do? So there's 94 call to action right now. And what's coming next is an inquiry into the murdered and missing Indigenous women in Canada. So that's also going to have a report with hopefully some calls to action about that too. So it's happening. The gathering of truth is happening. And now the ability for the rest of Canada to take action is coming. So I hope that helps.
It does help a great deal. And it does tie back beautifully to this notion of voicelessness, that raising awareness and becoming aware of the disproportionate silencing doesn't mean that one side needs to silence themselves. It's not that, like, God forbid it's not that. And it sounds to me like it's very much, again, about becoming knowledgeable, becoming informed, saying, I don't know, so can you help me understand? Yeah. And then sharing the space, like, and not treating people as victims. Like,
oh, totally. Yeah, because that perpetuates that systemic racism. It's like, I need to save you, poor you. You know, like
that's not even remotely helpful.
And what's really, but a respectful relationship between equals is one person, which is, doesn't talk all the time and fill the noise. One stops talking, even if you're not silencing yourself. Silence, listen. Learning to listen is part of communication and relationship, right? Mm-hmm. So a community that's used to being the authority or speaking all the time may have to stop talking for a while, and that's part of it, right?
Yeah.
So that is the journey, because it takes a while for one community to maybe start speaking. If they're not going to, I'm not saying it very well, but in the circle, if one person is talking all the time, the other people don't get a chance. So that's where experts and the non-Indigenous community could help, was by not having to be the expert every moment.
Right. Well, silence isn't the same thing as silencing.
Yes.
Being silent is part of the dialogue.
That was way more articulate than I said it. Say that again.
We'll tweet that one too. Silence isn't the same thing as silencing.
Very good.
But that is an important part of the dialogue, because, like you said, if one person is doing all the talking, the other isn't being heard.
Yeah.
Well, Andrea, sorry, Andrea, go ahead.
No, it's just like, and that would just perpetuate the old system.
Yeah.
We're moving into a new one.
Well, you are an absolute inspiration. thank you for doing what you do. For making this be heard in so many different ways. Is once again, for everyone watching, Andrea she's an actress, a very accomplished one, has 4 CDs out. Is it 5 now?
4 plus little songs and a symphony that haven't been recorded, but
like has an award-winning body of musical work, and that musical work aspect is really important to your expression too. Like that's a big part of it. Is a speaker, is out there helping communities heal, helping Indigenous voices and feminine voices be heard. So thank you for absolutely everything you do. Of course, I will link down below to all of Andrea's resources. Please check out her website, check out her talk, share it around, and let's keep the dialogue going. Let's help voices be heard. Your voice needs to be heard. It's critical. Now, as always, if you enjoyed this video, if you have found it helpful to finding your own voice, give it a thumbs up, hit subscribe on that button down below, and please head back to laurensergi.com, subscribe to my newsletter, as I will be rolling out more great interviews like this with people like Andrea for you to learn from in the future. Thank you so much for joining us on Talk Shop, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.